Science fiction stories of my grandfathers. Chapter 1. Waltzing on the outer moon of Saturn. On the lake was a flotilla of boats, wary that their deadly enemy might shoot out a strange violet beam. Kathleen was struck by how they'd all survived. We had had the best life in the solar system. We waltzed on the outer moon of Saturn, amongst the Japanese pillars lost in one another, while the others were caught by grey spheres, their eyes darkening as they gave without stint. In the laboratory we developed stone sculptures and botanical models. The chrono gauge indicated that return trip might not be possible. The cameras panned to the metal floor. Force shells were raining down. The annihilating force was resisted desperately by the machines. A light shone up the hill. The wind pushed through his men as they struggled upward. They were identical to the Ralas. Twice he took some water, but he'd rather eat poison than their food. The two captives were jerked out of the space pup. The great dome of the city that had stood against the heavens was now gone. Kathleen cried out when the second satellite revealed his dead body. Time was passing inexorably, and Lesbie felt compelled to act. He had a terrible conviction that he was ruining his relationship with the ship leadership, and the mutineers intended to use and discard him. The aliens ran for it, shouting out celibate prayers to the uranium fount. Beams and boats were outlined behind him. A long silvery grey arm dragged the invaders. They swarmed forth with a terrific clamour of alarm, generating power as they flashed their pistols in the face of danger. They killed the creatures from beyond the void, smashed the monsters. The Lawrence Fitzgerald contraction pulled at our ship, the hull groaning under the strain. Vernon shook his head as nervousness drifted through the air and settled with a shock. We watched the great craft drop slowly through the clouds and land on the twisted, massed rocks. They disembarked and made their way through the ancient structures, not more than 6 inches high, which had been stretched by time, sun, peace and war. Vernon glanced where the sun's beams fell on the worn-out machinery surrounding a small hut. We went to investigate in the last of the daylight. There was a great hulking machine that we probed, hoping to broadcast back a request. Tentacles writhed out from the darkening jungle. The men got up to leave. Lesbie caught his father's signal to remain. When they were alone, he spoke. "We have to create a plan to thwart a second rebellion. There is a scheme to evade Earth law by establishing a permanent colony on Centaurus and never returning to Earth. There is no Earth to go back to now. I'm baffled as to what to do." Outlines of dark continents and gleaming seas formed a network. Saja killed the loathsome insects in the silvery earthlight that shone from the solitary window. His captain stepped forward in time, dismissing the simple beginning, and reached a conclusion. He grabbed his arm, and year after year he moved closer. The denizens were dying. Vicious, inert, muffled cries and cheers came out of the storm. "There's not enough water for all of the worlds. We waited for green growth on the hills and rivulets to feed the rivers." Kathleen let the silver-lit panorama form a permanent image in her heart. 20 days earlier we had fought for the control of the land and sea device. As I looked at the sea, the door of the room opened, and the sphere sent out its powerful beam. The leafy murk swayed gently above the expedition. The government raids have not ceased, and commonplace time passed down into the building's interior. Privately, his father told him that the mutiny had been postponed. The rebel plan had been thwarted by the possibility that the planet might not sustain human life, and in any event, permission to settle would need to be granted by the native species. The well-studded sky receded, and a deep-toned hum rolled gradually over the hills. The alien waved its tentacles, and a spurt of black corruption spread over the grey plain. Within minutes they were submerged in water and in fear of drowning. The frogmen had experimented on them, making insidious incisions. The light fell on the giant metal wall. The dream beast fired 100 shots and spilled the blood of the green men. Civilization's cavernous throat distended over us, but my mind was comforted by the touch of a solitary life on Jupiter. The beast's insensate rage was dispatched into a mostly material cylinder. The dull minutes moved by. Our thoughts were uncontrolled as we moved up flights of stairs. When we reached the uppermost extremity of the massive hall, we plunged into pure fantasy, swam in its waters until we were forced to rise to the surface, gasping for breath. The queer walking grass god, Saja, piloted his boat, buoyed and whirling, directed by a brief word, reluctantly accelerating. His body was bruised where it had been forced violently against the giant dome. A snow-like substance covered the moon. Saja dived across the city, through the white cloud oceans which obscured the drab life and tedious activity. Hordes trained for 1,000,000 years tore at the tiny rounded hull. His eyes fell upon the 12 machines of Jupiter. Their forces were almost destroyed by the flaming sun. The ship had drifted into a gravity well, and Captain Lesby ordered the catapulting of our survey craft into the vortex. His brother's haggard eyes were augmented by the giant telescope. He moved toward the canal and cut off the invaders. The frogmen cried out upon seeing the flying boats rise above the temple. Their defense failed as 6 more flying boats came upon them. Saja was at the control of the leading boat and waved to the crowd as the darkness spread.